All right, so today we're diving into two stories from the Bible that on the surface look like they have nothing to do with each other. Seriously. One is about a super greedy servant, and the other is about a floating axe head. I know, it sounds random, but according to theologian Dr. John Oswalt, they're put together on purpose to tell one big, powerful story. Let's see if we can figure out how. So that's the big question, right? What in the world is the connection here? You've got this story about a huge moral failure, and then boom, right next to it, this kind of strange little miracle. What's the hidden thread tying them together? Well, to find it, we have to look at how the original text was written. And there it is. That's our first big clue. You see, our Bibles put a chapter break right in between them, but Dr. Oswalt points out that in the original Hebrew, the story just keeps going. There's no pause. It flows right from the greedy servant into the floating axe. The author clearly wanted us to read this as one continuous thought, a story about two very different ways of dealing with life.
So let's set the scene for Act 1. The prophet Elisha has just done something amazing. He's healed Naaman, a big-shot Syrian commander, of leprosy. Naaman is so grateful, he tries to give Elisha a ton of money and gifts, but Elijah says, nope, not taking a thing. Well, his servant, Gehazi, is watching all this and thinking, what a waste. And he's about to make a decision that's going to change his life forever.
Just look at this. The contrast couldn't be more stark. The author puts their promises, their oaths, right next to each other. Elisha swears by God that he won't take anything, showing he's all about integrity. And then, in the very next sentence, Gehazi swears by the same God that he's going to go get something for himself. It is a massive, pivotal moment of betrayal.
So Gehazi literally runs after Naaman's caravan. And this is where we see another incredible contrast. Naaman, this powerful commander who earlier was too proud to even get out of his chariot for the prophet, he now humbly gets down on the road to meet a mere servant. The guy is totally changed. And when Gehazi spins this lie asking for about 75 pounds of silver, the grateful Naaman insists he take double that.
Gehazi's cover-up is just cold and methodical. The original language uses these quick, sharp verbs. He took the silver, he stashed it in the house, he sent the men away. It's like a checklist of deception. He really thinks he's pulled it off, that nobody's going to find out.
Yeah, but he's not nearly as smart as he thinks he is. He walks back in to see his master, Elisha, and just tries to play it cool, like nothing happened. And the confrontation that happens next, it's quiet, but it is absolutely devastating.
You know, Dr. Oswalt really just puts it bluntly here. Sin makes you dumb. I mean, how could Gehazi, after spending all that time with a prophet like Elisha, possibly think he could get away with this lie? The point the story is making is that his greed made him blind. He couldn't see the reality right in front of him, that Elisha knew exactly what he'd been up to the whole time. And this is the final tragic twist. Elisha doesn't even ask him about the money at first. He asks him, was this the time to take money? The consequence is this perfect, terrible flip. Naaman, the guy who showed up covered in leprosy, leaves totally clean. And Gehazi, the servant who was perfectly healthy, gets struck with Naaman's leprosy, leaving him as white as snow. Now, it's really important to get this. Gehazi's story isn't just about greed for money. It's about a much deeper problem that Dr. Oswalt calls want. And this isn't about lacking stuff. It's a spiritual emptiness, right? A hole inside that no amount of silver or fancy clothes could ever fill. Gehazi had what he needed, but he was drowning in want. You know, there's a great story about J.C. Penney that just hits the nail on the head. He kept chasing that next financial goal, 1 million, then 5, then 10, thinking that would finally make him happy. But it never did. He eventually figured it out. Maybe I'm looking for something else. That's Gehazi's problem in a nutshell.
Okay, so right after that dark, tragic story, boom, the scene totally flips. We're in Act 2 now. The tension and deception are gone, and instead, we see this open, honest community. A group called the Sons of the Prophet comes to Elisha with a very simple, practical problem. Their house is just too small for all of them.
And you can feel the difference in the atmosphere right away. Unlike Naaman, who sent servants at first, these guys just come and talk to Elijah directly, face to face. There's no pride, no social barriers. It's just a group of friends. They even ask him to come with them, and he's like, sure, let's go. It's a picture of a healthy, humble community. So they all go down to the Jordan River to chop down some trees for their new building, and then disaster.
An axe head flies right off the handle and sinks into the river. And this was a huge problem. Iron was really expensive and valuable back then. But even worse, the guy cries out, "Oh no, master, it was borrowed." So now he's in debt and has no way to replace it.
So this guy is in a real crisis, but look at how he reacts. It's the complete opposite of Gehazi. He doesn't lie, he doesn't scheme, he doesn't try to cover it up, he just immediately cries out for help. And that vulnerability sets the stage for a totally different kind of miracle. Not one of judgment, but one of restoration. So what does Elisha do? He doesn't give a lecture, he doesn't pull out a bag of money, he just asks, "Hey, where did it fall in?" Then he cuts a stick from a tree and just tosses it in the water right there. It seems like such a strange, almost random thing to do.
And then the impossible happens. The Bible is so straightforward about it. It doesn't say Elisha cleverly fished it out with a stick or anything like that. It just says the iron floated. This heavy, lost piece of metal defies gravity and just comes right up to the surface. The message is pretty clear. With God, what seems hopelessly lost can be found.
So let's just pause on that for a second. A simple piece of wood becomes the tool that brings back what was lost. It's the physical object God uses for supernatural recovery. And for Dr. Oswalt, this is the whole point. This is not a random detail. And this is where he connects all the dots. He draws a straight line from that little stick in the Jordan River to the central story of the whole Bible. He's suggesting that just like that piece of wood restored the lost axe head, another piece of wood, the cross on Calvary, is how God makes a way for what is lost to be found again. See the contrast? Gehazi tried to fill his emptiness with silver and lost everything. This humble guy just cried out for help, and what he lost was miraculously given back. And that really brings the question back to us, doesn't it? These two ancient stories put right next to each other show us two different paths in life. One is the path of self-serving want, which only leads to more loss. The other is the path of humbly admitting our need, which can lead to restoration. It really makes you stop and ask yourself, what is it in my life that feels lost, and where am I looking to find it?